The October wind tore through Commonwealth Avenue like a blade wrapped in ice. 6-year-old Emma Valenti stood at the curb in her yellow raincoat, white sneakers planted firmly on the concrete, her small hand reaching upward. A red balloon bobbed above her head, dancing just beyond her fingertips, tugging her forward with every gust. She did not think. She simply ran. The traffic light had turned green. 3 lanes of Boston rush-hour traffic moved toward her like a predator closing in, engines rumbling, metal glinting in the afternoon sun. Emma's breath came in quick, visible clouds. The balloon drifted higher, and so did her feet, leaving the sidewalk behind. That was when Aria Reynolds looked up from her shopping bag. She was 31 years old but looked older, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the exhaustion across her face. Her eyes were a startling grey-green, the kind of eyes that belonged to someone who had survived things that should have broken her. She wore her black and white maid uniform, the fabric worn soft from 1,000 washings, and she carried a plastic grocery bag containing $78 worth of food, milk that would last 4 days, eggs, bread, a rotisserie chicken she would ration between herself and her 2 children for 3 dinners. Everything she had left until payday. Everything. She saw the girl. She saw the cars. She did not calculate. She did not weigh the cost of her own body against the life of a stranger's child. Aria dropped the bag. Groceries scattered across the October pavement like prayers, rolling beneath the feet of hurrying pedestrians who did not stop, did not look, did not care. She moved between the cars with an instinct born of desperation, the kind of desperation that strips away fear. A black SUV screeched to a halt, tires screaming against asphalt, the smell of burning rubber flooding the air like a gunshot in the silence. 3 feet. That was the distance between Emma's body and the vehicle's front bumper. Aria's hands grabbed Emma's arm, small, thin, fragile, and she pulled with every ounce of strength she possessed. The girl's yellow raincoat fluttered like a flag surrendering. Aria's calloused fingers, marked by 8 years of scrubbing other people's floors, closed around the child's wrist and yanked her backward onto the sidewalk. Dead leaves skittered around their feet in a sudden stillness. Emma's mouth opened. A scream emerged, not the scream of pain but the scream of a child who had just understood, in an instant, that she had been falling toward something terrible and a stranger had caught her mid-fall. Sobs came next, the kind of sobs that break something in a parent's heart, and Emma clutched at Aria's apron, her small face buried in black and white fabric that smelled of bleach and lavender soap. Aria knelt on the cold pavement, her hands shaking so badly she could barely touch the girl's face to check for injuries, to see if the cars had clipped her, had torn her skin, had stolen anything irreplaceable. She found nothing but terror and tears. "Are you hurt? Baby, are you hurt?" Aria's voice trembled like a candle in the wind. She smoothed Emma's blonde hair back from her forehead, wiped at the tears streaming down the child's cheeks with her thumbs. "I want my daddy," Emma sobbed. "I want my daddy, I want my daddy, I want my daddy." "Where is your daddy, sweetheart? Where does he live?" Emma's arm came up, pointing toward the building rising behind them, a gleaming structure of glass and steel that cut into the sky like a knife. 20 stories. Maybe more. Everything about it screamed money, power, consequence. Emma's small finger trembled as it pointed upward. Up there. Up there in the sky. Daddy lives up there. Building security arrived within 90 seconds. 2 men in dark blazers, both moving with the kind of coordinated efficiency that came from military training or worse. They knew who Emma was. They knew immediately. One of them spoke into a radio attached to his shoulder while the other gently pried Emma away from Aria's arms. The girl did not want to leave. She clung to the maid uniform with both fists, sobbing harder, reaching backward as the security officer carried her toward the building's entrance. Aria stood. Her hands were still shaking. The groceries were scattered everywhere, trampled, ruined. The milk carton had split open across the pavement. The bread was crushed. The chicken was somewhere near the storm drain, half in the gutter. She had just saved the daughter of the man whose mansion she cleaned 6 days a week. She did not know this yet. 30 stories above Commonwealth Avenue, In a penthouse office where the windows were floor to ceiling and the view stretched all the way to the harbor, Nicholas Valenti stood motionless. His hand was pressed against the glass so hard that his knuckles had turned white. He was tall, 6'3", with the kind of broad shoulders that came from genetics and violence, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that cost more than Aria Reynolds made in an entire month. His hair was dark, perfectly styled, silvered slightly at the temples. His face was sharp, all angles and control, except for one thing. A scar ran from the outer corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, pale and thin like a blade. His eyes were storm gray and they were burning. "Boss," Tony said quietly. Tony was his oldest lieutenant, thick-necked and scarred, a man who had been present at every important moment of Nicholas's reign. "The girl is safe. Security has her." Nicholas did not respond. He did not move. His eyes traced the small figure in the yellow raincoat being carried into the building, and then they found the woman in the maid uniform standing alone on the sidewalk, her hands covering her mouth. Tony and Enzo exchanged a look that required no words. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Valenti, neither of them had ever seen him move the way he had just moved. From his position at the desk 3 seconds before, he had crossed the office in 2 strides and placed his hand on the glass as if he could reach through it, as if he could reverse time by sheer force of will. 15 years, Enzo whispered, so quietly that even Tony almost didn't hear. "I have never seen him move like that." "Neither have I," Tony said. He waited. Then he added, "Something just changed." Emma was brought to the penthouse. The security officer delivered her to her father's office, and the girl launched herself at Nicholas's legs, still sobbing, still terrified. Nicholas lowered himself to the floor with a tenderness that was entirely unexpected. He held her against his chest and she cried into his shirt, her small hands gripping his tie. "You saved my daughter," Nicholas said. It was not a question. The security feed would replay every second. He already knew everything. He knew the exact moment Aria had decided to run. He knew that she had not hesitated. He knew that she had moved toward the danger instead of away from it. "Tell me her name," Nicholas commanded. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, and everyone in the room moved to obey immediately. Everyone except Tony, who was already moving toward the telephone, already pulling up the security footage, already cross-referencing everything. The name came back within 4 minutes. Aria Reynolds. Age 31. Employee of the house for 8 years. Maid. Invisible. And according to the background check, completely and entirely alone. 2 children. No family support. No father listed on either birth certificate. A rent that was 6 weeks overdue. A bank account containing the balance of $43.17. The kind of woman who had nothing to lose because she had already lost everything. The kind of woman who still ran toward a child she did not know. Nicholas held Emma against him and looked out the window toward the street below, where Aria Reynolds was gathering the ruined groceries with shaking hands, kneeling on the cold pavement, sweeping broken eggs into her palms as if her own food, her own life, her own survival still mattered. But what she did not know was that the man watching from the penthouse window was Nicholas Valenti, and that in Boston, the name Valenti meant power and shadow and consequence. He was the kind of man who had learned at age 7 that the world rewarded cruelty. He was the kind of man whose own brother had betrayed him, sold him out to the Russo family 20 years ago, disappeared into witness protection after trying to have Nicholas killed. He was the kind of man who had responded by systematically destroying every connection the Russo family had in New England, by building an empire so vast and so untouchable that even federal prosecutors had given up trying to touch him. He was a man who had taught himself that mercy was another word for weakness. And he had just watched a maid in a black and white uniform choose another person's child over her own survival. Something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest. Something that felt like it might be the opposite of mercy. Something he had not felt in so long that he did not have a name for it anymore. Emma's sobs were slowing. She was drifting toward exhaustion, the way children do, her body finally releasing the terror now that safety had claimed her. Nicholas carried her toward the sofa and laid her down, covering her with a cashmere throw that cost more than Aria Reynolds' monthly rent. "Have her brought to the office," Nicholas said. His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but something had shifted in his tone. "The maid. Aria Reynolds. Bring her to me. Now." Tony hesitated. "Sir, she does not know." "I am aware of what she does not know," Nicholas said. "Bring her anyway." The sun was setting over Boston. The wind was picking up again, carrying the smell of rain, promising a cold night ahead. Aria Reynolds was walking home with her destroyed groceries in a paper bag, and she did not know that in exactly 8 minutes, the front door of her building would open and a black SUV would pull to the curb, and her life was about to splinter into a before and an after. She did not know that the child she had saved lived in the penthouse. She did not know that the man who had been watching her through the windows for 8 years had just seen her at her most human, most vulnerable, most real. She did not know that everything was about to change. 3 months earlier, the alarm on Aria Reynolds' phone screamed at 4:16 in the morning. She did not snooze it. Snoozing was a luxury for people who had choices. Her fingers found the phone in the dark, silenced the sound, and she lay still for exactly 3 seconds, gathering the strength to move her body from the mattress. The studio apartment was cold. October was slipping into November, and the radiator in the corner was doing what it always did, humming uselessly like a dying animal. Aria pulled the blanket higher over herself, but not to stay warm. She was covering her shoulders, covering the scars that mapped her spine like a geography of things she would never speak aloud. On the pull-out mattress beside her bed, her 2 children were still sleeping. Maya, 8 years old, was curled on her side with her thumb in her mouth, a habit she thought she had broken 3 years ago but had returned to during the hungry months. Lucas, 5, was sprawled diagonally across the mattress the way small children do, his chest rising and falling with the deep breathing of someone whose mind had not yet learned to carry worry. Aria watched them for 6 seconds. This was part of her morning ritual, this counting of breaths, this verification that they were still alive, still here, still hers. Then she stood. Her knees made small cracking sounds. She was 29 years old, but her body moved like someone much older, as if every shift, every humiliation, every hour without enough food had calcified in her joints. The kitchen was 6 feet away. A hot plate, a dented kettle, a cabinet with 4 bowls and 6 spoons. Aria filled the kettle with water from the tap and placed it on the burner. While she waited for the water to boil, she counted her money. This was also part of the ritual. She pulled the bills and coins from the pocket of yesterday's jeans, the only jean she owned that did not have a hole in the thigh. 120. 3 ones. 2 quarters. 3 dimes. 2 nickels. 3 pennies. $78. That was everything. That was all that stood between her and nothing. She had earned $142 this week. One of those dollars went to the bus pass. $37 went to Victoria Ashford. $15 went to the landlord as a down payment on next month's rent, which meant she still owed another $320 that she did not have. That left $78 to feed 3 people for 7 days. $11 a day. $3.60 per person per day. The water began to boil. It screamed. She poured it into a pot with rolled oats and a pinch of salt. No sugar. No milk. The oatmeal thickened into a grey paste that tasted like cardboard mixed with water, but it was warm and it was filling and it was all there was. When it was cool enough, she divided it into 3 bowls. The biggest portion went to Lucas because his bones were still growing and children needed protein, though she had no protein to give him. The second biggest went to Maya. The smallest went to Aria herself. At 5:15, she woke the children. Maya woke slowly, her 8-year-old face still soft with sleep for about 6 seconds before the weight of the day settled behind her eyes. Lucas woke screaming, the way he always did, caught in some nightmare he could never quite remember. Aria sat beside him and let him grip her arm while his breathing returned to normal. By 5:30, both children were eating their oatmeal at the small table that tilted slightly to one side because one of its legs was shorter than the others. "Mama, is this all we get?" Lucas asked. "This is breakfast," Aria said. The words were careful, constructed with precision, designed not to be a lie but to be incomplete. "We have plenty for lunch and dinner too." They did not. But he was 5. He did not need the whole truth yet. Maya did not ask questions. She had learned not to. She ate her oatmeal in the precise way she always did, small spoon, small bites, chewing slowly to make it last longer. Her school uniform was laid out on the chair beside her. Navy blue jumper with a stain on the left side that Aria had tried to scrub out 3 times. White blouse with a button missing that she had replaced with thread wound around and around the hole because she could not afford a replacement button. The shoes had been resoled twice. How long they would hold together was a question Aria tried not to think about. At 5:45, she braided Maya's hair while Lucas watched cartoons on the laptop she had bought used for $80, the single largest purchase of her life. The computer was 3 years old and ran slowly, but it meant that for 20 minutes every morning, Lucas could disappear into a world where children had full bellies and mothers did not shake with cold when they thought no one was watching. At 6:15, she dressed them both. Navy blue uniforms. White socks that had become grey from washing. Backpacks that contained their homework and, hidden in the bottom, 2 granola bars each that Aria had saved from her own lunch for the past 2 weeks. The children would eat them in the bathroom at school, hiding from the teacher who might ask questions about food, about poverty, about why Lucas sometimes fell asleep in afternoon classes. "Will you be late tonight?" Maya asked. She was looking at Aria with the expression of someone much older than 8. "I may be late," Aria said. Which meant yes, I will be late, I will always be late, there is never enough time. You will pick up Lucas from Mrs. Chen at 5 o'clock exactly. You will eat the dinner I left in the refrigerator. You will help him with homework. You will go to sleep at 8 p.m. What if you do not come home? Lucas asked suddenly, his small voice cutting through the noise of the cartoon. Aria knelt down so that she was at eye level with him. His eyes were the color of coffee, like his father's, and she hated that. She hated being reminded of the man she had escaped, but she loved her son with a fierceness that burned constantly, like a candle in her chest that could never be extinguished. "I will always come home," she said. "I promise." She did not mention that promises were fragile things, easily broken, easily forgotten. At 6 years old, he did not need to know that promises were the only thing she had left to give him. By 6:45, she had walked them to school. The walk took 18 minutes. She carried Lucas for the last 5 because his legs got tired. She did not run. Running cost energy, and energy was a resource she had to portion out like the oatmeal, like the money. When they reached the school gate, she let them go. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 3 years ago, during the drive to Boston with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a desperate prayer that no one would find her. The Beacon Hill mansion was 6 miles away, and she reached it at 7:50 a.m. She was 10 minutes early, which meant she was precisely on time. Aria had learned that there was no such thing as early or on time in this world. There was only late and losing your job. She entered through the service door, the one that the Mafia boss's men pretended did not exist, the one that servants used so that the people who lived in this house would not have to look at them arriving or leaving. The service bathroom was narrow and had no window. She changed into her uniform, black dress with a white apron, white collar and cuffs, the outfit that made her invisible. This was the great gift of the uniform. Invisibility. In it, she could walk through rooms where dangerous men discussed loyalty and territories. In it, she could stand in corners and listen to conversations that would have gotten her killed if she had been visible. The uniform rendered her abstract, a function rather than a person. A cleaning tool with a face. The 3rd floor hallway was where she began. Cream-colored walls, crown molding, a runner rug that cost more than everything Aria owned. She got down on her knees with her bucket of hot water and her rags and began to scrub. This was when she heard the voices of Tony and Enzo coming from the study downstairs. She could not hear the words at first, only the tone, Tony's voice sharp and urgent, Enzo's flat and dangerous. She scrubbed and listened. "The Hale situation is escalating," Tony said. "He knows the rules," Enzo replied. "Territory disputes get settled through official channels. He is not interested in official channels. He has been moving people through his network. Women, specifically. Desperate women." Aria's hands went still. She did not mean for them to stop. It was automatic. Her body remembered things her mind was trying to forget. "Trafficking?" Enzo asked. "Trafficking," Tony confirmed. "Low profile, high volume, high profit. He is using it to fund expansion into our territory. The boss needs to know." The voices faded as they moved deeper into the study. Aria waited 30 seconds, then continued scrubbing. Her hands had started to shake. She put them in the water, which was still hot enough to make the skin red, and kept them there until the shaking stopped. She cleaned the library next, the room with floor-to-ceiling books and the mahogany desk where Nicholas Valenti conducted business. The desk had a leather surface that she dusted carefully, moving papers only as much as necessary. Bank statements. Wire transfer receipts. An invitation to a charity gala. A photograph in a silver frame of a small girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with dark hair and the kind of eyes that had never known want. Aria did not allow herself to look at the photograph for more than 2 seconds. By noon, she had cleaned the 2nd and 3rd floors. She had stripped the bedsheets from 3 rooms. She had scrubbed the bathrooms until they gleamed. She had not eaten lunch. The granola bar she had packed was in her pocket, saved for tonight when she could sit on the bus ride home and pretend it was a meal. In the staff locker room, she opened her small metal locker and looked at what she kept there besides her street clothes and her jacket. A small pair of shoes, white with pink laces, size 5. They were worn at the heels from a child who had not yet learned to walk properly. They were the shoes from the shelter, from 3 years ago, from the night she had arrived with nothing and a social worker had handed her this child's first pair of shoes because the shelter had a donation bin and Maya had nothing to her name. Aria touched the shoes once, briefly, the way someone touches a prayer. Then she closed the locker. At 3:51 p.m., as she was cleaning the front hallway, the door to Nicholas Valenti's private study opened. He emerged with a phone pressed to his ear. The Mafia boss was tall, 6'2", with a kind of shoulders that made doorways seem smaller. His suit was charcoal grey and probably cost more than a year of Aria's rent. His hair was dark, slicked back, and his eyes, she caught them for less than a second, were the color of a storm. There was a scar running from his eye to his cheekbone, a silver line that somehow made him look more powerful instead of less. He was speaking. "I want to know everything about Hale's operation by tonight. Networks, locations, names. Everything." He paused, listening. "Yes, I am aware that it is complicated. I do not pay you to tell me about complications. I pay you to solve them." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. For a moment, just a moment, his gaze swept across the hallway and landed on Aria, who was standing with her cleaning bucket in her hand, making herself as small as possible. She was invisible. Or so she thought. Nicholas Valenti sat alone in his office as the October darkness pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The amber liquid in his crystal glass caught the light like liquid gold. On his mahogany desk lay a photograph, 7 years old, edges worn from handling. In it, 2 young men stood on the Boston docks, arms slung around each other's shoulders, sunlight turning their hair copper. Brothers. Nicholas and Marco. He did not need to look at the photograph to remember what came next. The door opened without a knock. Tony entered, a man built like a linebacker with graying temples and the permanent exhaustion of someone who had seen too much. He was carrying a folder. Tony's voice was steady, the voice of a man accustomed to delivering news in the spaces between heartbeats. "The warehouse manifests are ready for your review, boss." Nicholas did not look up from the photograph. My brother sold us out to the Castellano family for $200,000 and a promise of territory. I watched them execute him on this floor. You were there, Tony. What did I choose? The silence stretched like taffy, difficult and thick. Tony's jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of that night, the gunshots, the blood spreading across this very office floor, the way Marco had looked at Nicholas in the final second before everything ended. Survival, boss. You chose survival. Nicholas set the photograph down with the care of someone handling something fragile. And I would make the same choice again. But it carved something out of me, Tony. The ability to trust. To believe in loyalty without suspicion. I have spent 7 years building walls so high that even you keep your distance. He finally turned to face his lieutenant. Who was the woman in the street? Tony blinked. Excuse me. The woman who pulled Emma from traffic. Who threw herself in front of a car to save a child she did not know. I watched the security footage 8 times. She did not hesitate, Tony. Not for 1 second. She saw danger and she ran toward it instead of away. Nicholas rose and walked to the surveillance monitors mounted on his wall. With one keystroke, the footage began. The dry October afternoon materialized on screen, Emma walking too close to the curb, the black sedan accelerating, Nicholas's daughter stepping directly into its path. And then a blur of motion, a woman's body angling between the car and the child, the impact absorbed by her shoulders instead of Emma's small frame. The sedan screeched to a halt. The woman, her dark hair escaping its bun, knelt beside Emma with her hands shaking, checking for injuries, her lips moving in words the camera could not capture. She protected Emma like that child belonged to her. Nicholas watched the footage cycle through again, then a third time. His storm grey eyes did not blink. Enzo entered, the second lieutenant, younger than Tony by a decade, with the kind of face that looked carved from marble. What are you watching? Enzo asked. Nicholas did not answer. Instead, he rewound the footage once more, focusing on the woman's face in the moment before impact. There was no fear there. Only clarity. Only the absolute certainty that some things were worth dying for. Find out everything about the woman who works on the 3rd floor, Nicholas said quietly. The one with dark hair. The one who keeps her head down. Her name, her story, everything. And do it quietly. Tony and Enzo exchanged a look neither had seen in 7 years. 2 days passed. Nicholas moved through them like a man walking underwater, board meetings with capos from New York, a shipment that arrived 3 hours late, Emma asking at dinner if the nice lady was coming back. He told his daughter no. But he was lying. On the 3rd day, Tony delivered a manila folder across Nicholas's desk. Inside was a life in pieces. Aria Reynolds. 28 years old. Single mother. 2 children, both under 10. Currently employed as a housekeeper at the Valenti residence earning $2,100 per month. Previously employed as a night shift waitress, a home health aide, a temp agency worker. No criminal record. No family listed. And then the real information. The part that made Nicholas's hands go still. 8 years ago, her employment history vanished into sealed court documents. No explanation. No public record. During that missing time, she had been nowhere in the system. Just gone. Then she reappeared 7 years ago in subsidized housing in Dorchester, working 3 jobs simultaneously, living below the poverty line. Current debts, $85,000 owed to Victoria Ashford, a wealthy socialite and loan predator who preyed on desperate women. Medical bills from 7 years ago. Pneumonia treatment for 2 children. No insurance. Amount in Aria Reynolds' bank account as of this morning, $78. Nicholas read the number 3 times. $78. That was everything she had in the world. How much time? He asked Tony. 14 days before the debt transfers to a man named Douglas Hale. Victoria Ashford's arrangement. After that, Aria becomes his problem. His property. Douglas Hale. The name carried a weight like a stone dropped into black water. Nicholas stood and walked to his private study, to the safe behind the portrait of his father. He entered the combination by muscle memory, dates of betrayals, dates of deaths, and the metal door swung open. Inside lay the kind of resources that could erase a person or save one, depending on how they were deployed. He did not take the money yet. Instead, he picked up his phone and called his daughter into the study. Emma appeared in the doorway, 6 years old and already possessing her father's sharp eyes. She wore a pink dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, her blonde hair in plaits her nanny had woven that morning. "Daddy," she asked. "Are you okay?" Nicholas knelt to her eye level. "The woman who saved you in the street. Do you remember her?" Emma nodded, her face serious. "She was scared, but she did it anyway. Like the princess in my book who fights the dragon even though she is afraid." Nicholas felt something shift in his chest, the sound of a lock turning. "What if I told you that woman was in trouble? That someone bad was trying to hurt her?" Emma's small hands reached out and gripped her father's face. "You fix it, Daddy. You are strong. You fix it." It was not a request. It was a fact, delivered with the absolute certainty of a child who had never known her father to fail. Nicholas brought Emma to the office on Thursday afternoon. He told her to bring her drawing supplies. When Aria arrived, summoned by a housekeeper who said Mr. Valenti needed to see her, her hands were still damp from scrubbing the marble floors on the second level. She wore her black and white maid's uniform, her dark hair pinned back, her eyes cast downward in the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Emma abandoned her chair and ran straight at Aria, wrapping her small arms around the maid's waist. Aria's entire body went rigid. "Thank you for saving me," Emma said into the fabric of Aria's uniform. "I wanted to say thank you properly." Nicholas watched from behind his desk as Aria's hands hovered in the air, uncertain whether to touch the child. Then, slowly, she lowered her arms and held Emma gently, like the girl was made of spun glass. Her eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened, they were glistening. "You are welcome, Miss Emma," Aria whispered. Emma pulled back and thrust a drawing at Aria. It was a simple thing, red crayon and colored pencil on white paper, a stick figure woman holding the hand of a smaller figure, a red balloon floating above their heads. At the bottom, in shaky letters, Emma had written, "Thank you." Aria's fingers trembled as she took the drawing. Nicholas dismissed his daughter with a gesture, and a housekeeper appeared to lead her away. When they were alone, the office became smaller, colder, the weight of his attention focused entirely on the woman standing in front of his desk. "Sit down, Miss Reynolds." Aria remained standing, her chin slightly raised despite the fear radiating from her. "How much do you owe Victoria Ashford?" Her shoulders tightened like a fist. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Valenti." $85,000. "You have 14 days. "I know everything, Miss Reynolds. Tony discovered it this morning. The medical bills, the interest, the impossible mathematics of a debt designed to grow faster than any person could ever repay." Aria turned toward the door. "With respect, sir, my debts are my own." "Sit down." The command was not spoken loudly, but it carried the weight of 7 years of absolute authority. Men had learned to obey that voice instantly. Aria, trembling, sat on the edge of the leather chair. Nicholas leaned forward, his storm-grey eyes fixed on her face. "I am not a good man, Miss Reynolds. I have done things that would make you run screaming from this room. But I pay my debts, and those who are loyal to me do not stand alone. You saved my daughter's life. You threw yourself in front of a moving car for a child you did not know. So I am going to ask you one question, and I want the truth. Why does Victoria Ashford own you?" Aria's walls cracked. She told him about the pneumonia, the hospital bills, the absence of insurance. She told him about Victoria's predatory offer, how the interest compounded, how the fees multiplied, how the debt became a living thing that fed on her labor. She spoke with the precision of someone who had recited these facts to herself 10,000 times, trying to understand how her life had become mathematics. She did not mention the scars running across her back like a map of hell. She did not mention the 8 missing years, or what had happened during them. When she finished, Nicola said, "In 15 years, my men have never seen me offer charity. But you saved Emma. So I will pay your debt to Victoria Ashford. All of it. Every dollar. You will owe me nothing." "Why?" Aria's voice broke like ice cracking under weight. "Why would you help me? I am nobody. Just a maid who cleans your floors." Nicola stood and walked to the window overlooking Boston. The city sprawled beneath him, a kingdom of glass and steel. "Because my own brother betrayed me for money, and I learned that loyalty is rarer than diamonds. You showed loyalty to a stranger, to my child. That is worth more than $85,000. It is worth everything." Aria shook her head. "I cannot accept this. It is too much." But what she did not know was that Nicholas Valenti had already decided. The decision had made itself the moment he watched the security footage 3 times and understood that this woman, this invisible woman scrubbing his floors, possessed something his money could never buy. She had a capacity for love that transcended survival. That same evening, as Aria walked from the mansion toward the bus stop, a black sedan pulled slowly alongside her. The window descended with a soft hiss of power mechanics. Douglas Hale sat in the driver's seat, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. He was thin in a way that suggested hunger, not exercise. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Aria Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying the texture of wet gravel. "I have been hearing about you." Aria's step quickened. "For days," Douglas called after her. "Your debt transfers to me in 4 days. After that, you work for me. Your children eat because of my mercy. You breathe because of my permission." The sedan accelerated ahead of her, then slowed, then pulled away into the darkness. That night, Aria held her children close and did not sleep. The Mass Avenue Bridge stretched across the Charles River like a blade suspended between 2 worlds. Late October night, the air dry and cutting, the kind of cold that sliced through fabric and into bone. Aria Reynolds stood at the railing, her fingers gripping metal so cold it burned. Below, the water moved dark and still, reflecting nothing. She had not eaten in 3 days. Neither had Maya or Lucas. This morning, Maya, 8 years old with her father's dark eyes, had asked why they did not have food. Aria had made tea from hot water and sugar and told her daughter it was a special breakfast. Lucas, 5 years old and stopped asking questions weeks ago, had drunk it without complaint. The absence of his voice asking why was somehow worse than any cry. Aria's coat hung loose on her shoulders, a thin thing that cost $7 at the Salvation Army 2 years ago. In the pocket, her fingers found the child's shoes, small leather Mary Janes with a buckle, the first pair of shoes Aria had ever owned that were not hand-me-downs, from the shelter when she was 11. She kept them still. She did not know why. She kept them like a prayer keeps a drowning person afloat. The wind moved through the bridge cables with a sound like weeping. What kind of mother lets her children starve? What kind of mother cannot protect them from men like Douglas Hale? She had given her last $78 to Victoria Ashford 3 days ago, a futile gesture, blood from a stone. It had bought her 48 hours of silence before the threats resumed. Before Douglas's sedan rolled alongside her with his wet gravel voice, "For days, Aria. Your debt transfers to me in 4 days. After that, you work for me. Your children eat because of my mercy. You breathe because of my permission." The railing was solid under her palms. How easy it would be. How simple. To just let go. To stop fighting. To stop failing them. But then she felt the weight of the small shoes in her coat pocket, and she remembered Maya's laugh from 6 months ago when Aria had made shadow puppets on the apartment wall. She remembered Lucas's sleepy smile when he woke believing that today might be the day his mother could take him to the park. She remembered the way they trusted her completely, absolutely, with a kind of trust that could shatter her into pieces. Not like this. Never like this. Aria stepped back from the railing. She walked through the cold streets of Boston toward the Valenti mansion, arriving at 11 p.m. with her service key burning in her pocket like a brand. The October night swallowed her footsteps. The mansion rose before her in shadow and brass, windows dark except for one, the third-floor office where Nicholas always worked late, reviewing papers, making calls that determined the fates of men. She used her key. The back entrance, the service stairs. No one stopped her because no one ever noticed her. She was a ghost in a black and white uniform, invisible as silence. The knock on his office door sounded too loud in the quiet. Nicholas looked up from his desk, papers scattered before him, a cigar burning in a crystal ashtray. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the gold watch catching lamplight. His eyes took in her appearance, the hollow face, the thin coat, the way she trembled, and something shifted in his expression, a door opening onto territory he had not visited in years. "Miss Reynolds." "It is late," he said, his voice carrying the texture of worn leather. "My children have not eaten in 3 days." The words broke as they came out, her voice fracturing like thin ice under weight. Tears ran down her face before she could stop them. "I came to accept your offer. I will owe you everything. I will work for free. I will do anything, but please help me feed my children." Nicholas stood. The chair scraped against hardwood. He crossed the office in 4 measured steps and stopped before her, his height making her small in a way that should have frightened her but did not. "How long since you have eaten?" he asked. "That does not matter." He picked up the phone on his desk without breaking eye contact. "This is Nicholas Valenti. Bring food to my office immediately. Enough for 3 people. And coffee." He hung up. "Sit." Aria sat because her legs would no longer hold her. "I cannot pay you back $85,000, she said. "I cannot even pay you back $85. I told you, you owe me nothing." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you do this? I am nobody. Just a maid who cleans your floors." Nicholas sat on the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. In 15 years, Tony and Enzo, watching from the hallway outside, had never heard him speak with this texture of tenderness. When Emma ran into that street, you did not hesitate. You did not calculate cost or benefit. You did not think about whether I could pay you. You just moved. That is who you are. And I will not let Douglas Hale or Victoria Ashford destroy that. Not while I still breathe. The housekeeper arrived with food, roasted chicken, pasta, bread, fruit. Real food. Aria ate slowly, each bite a small resurrection. Nicholas watched her with an expression that looked like grief, like he was witnessing something precious being restored to life. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in the North End, Douglas Hale sat at a green felt poker table in an underground room that smelled of cigar smoke and old money. 6 men surrounded him, his network, the ones who helped him circle desperate women and pull them into darkness. They had been celebrating. A new shipment arriving next week. New women. New debts to collect. The room's single door burst open at 11:22 p.m. 12 men in black tactical gear moved through the space like ghosts. Every weapon disappeared from every hand in the span of 10 seconds. Tony led the entry, Enzo covered the exits, and behind them came Nicholas Valenti, moving slowly, deliberately, no gun visible but radiating something far more lethal than any weapon. Douglas stood up, cards falling. "Valenti, this is neutral territory, you cannot." "Sit down." Douglas Saturday. "You have been circling Aria Reynolds for months," Nicholas said, his voice carrying the weight of an execution order. "You threatened her children. You told her she would breathe because of your permission. That ends tonight." Douglas's hands shook as he gripped the edge of the table. "She owes money. I have a legal contract with Victoria Ashford. You cannot touch me." "I can," Nicholas said. "And I am." He nodded to Tony, who made a single phone call. 2 minutes later, 2 men in expensive suits entered the poker room. Castellano family. They were not there to help Douglas. The Castellano lieutenant looked at Nicholas with respect. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Hale has been skimming from our operations for 3 years. We will handle it from here. Douglas's face went white. No, wait, I can explain. The Castellano men grabbed him. Douglas begged, collapsed to his knees, trembling like a cornered animal caught in a closing fist. Please, Valenti, please, I will disappear. I will leave Boston. I will never touch her. Too late, Nicholas said. You made her children go hungry. Douglas and his 6 men were dragged away screaming into the October darkness, handed to the Castellano family for their own brand of justice. They would never be seen again. Not in Boston. Not anywhere. Disappeared, like they had never existed at all. That same night, as Aria slept in the mansion's guest room with a full stomach for the first time in weeks, federal agents were preparing documents in an FBI field office. Victoria Ashford was about to discover that Nicholas had made one phone call to a contact who owed him a favor. One call describing her debt scheme, her predatory lending to women without options, her connections to Douglas Hale's network. One call that began the end of everything she had built on the suffering of the invisible. At dawn, they came to her Beacon Hill townhouse. Silk robe, bare feet on marble, photographers capturing every moment as Victoria Ashford was led to a black SUV in handcuffs. The news ran the story for 3 days straight. Socialite charged with racketeering. Loan sharking. Conspiracy to commit human trafficking. 40-year federal prison sentence pending. Assets frozen. Social standing destroyed. Everything she had used to crush Aria turned to ash. That afternoon, Nicholas visited Aria in the guest room where she slept, where sunlight finally touched her face with gentleness. He held 2 checks. The first was made out to Victoria Ashford's attorney for $85,000. The debt, cleared forever. The second was for $20,000, made out to Aria Reynolds. I cannot accept this, Aria said, her voice still carrying the fragile quality of something recently shattered. It is not charity. It is payment for saving my daughter's life. And for showing me that not everyone in this world is calculating their next betrayal. He placed them in her trembling hands. Douglas Hale and his network will never touch you again. Victoria Ashford will spend 40 years in federal prison thinking about the woman she could not break. You are free, Aria. Truly free. She collapsed into the chair behind her, the checks falling from her fingers, finally safe. Finally safe. And as the tears came, different tears now, tears of release instead of despair, she heard the sound of rain beginning against the windows, the October sky finally breaking open after weeks of dry cold. Water against glass. The sound of the sky weeping with her. The sound of chains breaking. 1 year later, the October wind returned to Boston like an old scar remembering its wound. Aria Reynolds stood at a floor-to-ceiling window in the financial district, 40 stories above the streets that had once tried to swallow her whole. The city sprawled beneath her, indifferent and gleaming, the same city that had taught her survival was not guaranteed, that invisibility could be a choice or a curse depending on which side of the glass you stood. She wore a navy business suit now, tailored to fit a woman who had learned to take up space. Her dark hair, no longer dull from exhaustion, was pulled back in a way that showed her face completely. She had stopped hiding. The nameplate on her office door read, Executive Director, House of Hope. The non-profit she had built from nothing, funded by an anonymous donor who had moved the obstacles from her path like a man clearing rubble after a disaster. She had never asked who it was. Some questions carried their own answers if you waited long enough. Behind her on the wall hung photographs. Children in classrooms. Women at job training centers. A ribbon-cutting ceremony where Aria stood between 2 women she had helped escape, their faces bright with possibility. There were no photographs of Nicholas Valenti in her office, though his influence moved through every program like water finding its shape. A scholarship fund for women escaping debt. Legal resources for trafficking survivors. A housing program that asked no questions about a woman's past, only about her future. Aria's own children thrived now. Maya and Lucas attended Brookline Academy, their uniforms pressed, their lunch boxes filled with fruit and sandwiches instead of whatever they could steal from the school cafeteria. They slept in warm beds. They asked for things children were supposed to ask for: new shoes, books, a puppy. They did not ask if their mother would be there in the morning. The transformation had happened slowly, then all at once, like a photograph developing in chemical solution. She kept the child's first pair of shoes on her office shelf. White leather with pink laces, so small they fit in the palm of her hand. A souvenir from the shelter where her daughter had first worn them, where Aria had knelt on linoleum and cried because it was the only thing she could afford. Now the shoes sat beside a Crystal Award for non-profit leadership, beside a framed photograph of her with Emma at a charity gala, all three of them smiling like people who believed in tomorrow. Victoria Ashford was serving 40 years in federal prison. Aria had watched the sentencing on the news without sound, understanding through body language alone. The silk robe stripped away, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. The socialite transformed into inmate number 8 for 7291. The woman who had circled Aria for years, extracting money and humiliation in equal measure, now lived in a cell 8 feet by 10 feet, eating food she did not choose, speaking only when permission was granted. Some miracles wore the shape of justice. Douglas Hale had vanished entirely. The network dismantled, the men scattered, handed to families who did not negotiate or forgive. Aria had never learned the details. Some knowledge was a burden she did not need to carry. The penthouse was quiet except for the wind against the glass, that October wind that still carried the memory of her lowest moment. She had not forgotten the bridge, the wet rails beneath her palms, the voice in her head saying that her children deserved a mother who could provide. That moment lived in her bones like an old break that had healed stronger than the original bone. The doorbell rang at 6:17 in the evening, a sound so unexpected that Aria turned from the window like someone waking from sleep. She opened the door to find Nicholas Valenti standing in her threshold wearing a black cashmere coat, no bodyguards, no men in suits stationed in the hallway. Just him. 42 years old and looking every one of them, his dark eyes carrying the weight of empires built and destroyed, his silver-threaded hair catching the light from her apartment. He had changed too, but differently. The walls were still there, but they had developed windows. "Mr. Valenti," she said, and her voice came out surprised, almost uncertain, as if she had forgotten what his presence felt like. "I did not expect." "I should have called first," he interrupted, his voice like venom wrapped in silk, like thunder that had learned to speak quietly. "May I come in?" She stepped back and he crossed the threshold, bringing with him the smell of cold air and expensive cologne and something else, something like intention. He wore a white shirt beneath the coat, open at the collar, revealing the curve of his chest and the faint scar that ran along his collarbone. He had told her once about that scar, though he had not told her everything. Some truths lived in the spaces between words. Nicholas looked around her apartment slowly, taking in the bookshelves, the warm lighting, the children's artwork on the refrigerator, the small life she had rebuilt in the shape of safety. "You have done well," he said finally. "Because of you," Aria replied, and the words came out small, careful, like she was still learning how to accept help. "Because of you," he corrected. "I just removed the obstacles." The distance between them felt like it could shatter or bridge depending on who moved first. Aria sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, and Nicholas remained standing, looking at her with an intensity that made her want to disappear and also never want him to look away. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because I have carried something for a year and I need to say it while I still have the courage." He paused, and in that pause Aria heard the sound of his own breathing, deliberately controlled. "When you saved Emma, I was standing at the penthouse window convinced that the world was broken and every person in it was calculating their advantage. My own brother sold me for money when I was 19 years old. Everything I learned after that moment taught me that trust was a luxury only fools could afford. I built walls so high that I could not see over them anymore, Aria. I could not see anything except threats and calculations." He moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth coming from his body. And then you moved. No hesitation, no calculation, just action. You reminded me that goodness still exists, even in a city like this. Even in the darkness where I have spent my entire life. Aria's eyes filled with tears, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. I am not good, Mr. Valenti. I am just a mother trying to survive. I have done terrible things. I have lied and stolen, Anne. You are more than that, he interrupted, and his voice was different now, stripped of its armor. And I need you to know that you were never invisible to me. From the first day you worked in my house, I saw you. I saw the way you kept your head down and your spine straight even when your hands shook with exhaustion. I saw strength that most of my men do not possess. I just did not know how to say it until now. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a piece of paper, white and folded. When he opened it, she saw numbers written in careful handwriting. A phone number. His phone number. I came here to tell you the truth I carried every day since you saved my child, he said. What you do with it is your choice. I am not asking for anything, Aria. I am not demanding anything. I am just telling you that when you are ready, if you ever are, I will be here. He placed the paper on her coffee table, beside the photograph of Emma and Aria at the gala, both of them radiant with hope. As he walked toward the door, Aria spoke his name for the first time. Nicholas. He stopped, his hand on the doorframe, and turned back. Thank you, she said. For seeing me. Always, he replied, and then he was gone, leaving behind only the smell of cold air and the sound of the elevator descending, carrying him back down to the city where he still ruled, where his empire had finally begun to serve something other than power. Aria stood at her window watching his black SUV pull away from the curb below, disappearing into the Boston evening traffic. She held his phone number in her hand, feeling its weight like it was written in something heavier than ink. The sky was beginning to clear, the October rain moving out and the clouds breaking apart, and she realized she was crying again. But these tears were different. These were tears of release, of burden set down, of invisible chains finally breaking. And she understood, in that moment, that a miracle was not always loud or divine or announced by angels. Sometimes a miracle was just a man choosing to see you when the world told him to look away. Sometimes it was a choice made in an October afternoon, a small child pulled from traffic, a moment of instinct that unraveled everything and rebuilt it as something beautiful. She did not know if she would call the number. That future remained unwritten. But for the first time since she had stood on the bridge with rain in her hair and desperation in her heart, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she deserved one. Outside, the sky cleared completely, revealing stars beginning to emerge like promises being kept. And across the city, in a penthouse that looked out over the same Boston lights, Nicholas Valenti sat in his study with his daughter Emma asleep on his chest, reading her a bedtime story in a voice that had never learned tenderness until it was too late, until love had arrived in the shape of an invisible maid who had reminded him that goodness was not extinct. If this story touched you, drop a like right now and share it with someone who needs to hear that miracles exist. Subscribe so you do not miss tomorrow's story about survival and unexpected redemption. And remember, you are never as invisible as you think. Someone sees you. Hold on. Your moment is coming. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places.